Okay, we are live, and this is the meeting of the Montessori, or I always, I want to say Montessori, which is an education system, but I think it's Montessori or something like that. Matsuri. Obviously, I am not an anime follower at all, but most of LawTube, or a big chunk of it, is all in Houston. So we are doing the show here for everybody else. So let's see, the first story I came up with, I just saw this morning. I asked Steve, SouthernLaw, to take a look at it if he could, but I don't know if you guys know this, but according to Tyrese Gibson of Fast and the Furious, Home Depot is racist. And he is suing them for, what, $1 million?
Yes.
$1 million. Seems like an appropriate amount.
$1 million.
With an M.
I want $1 million.
So,
how do I get in on this?
Well, once you hear about the suit, you'll find it's fairly easy.
Yes, it's there we go. I saw this earlier, so I know Steve went and pulled up the suit, and you shared a part of it. Let me see if I can summarize it. From what I understand, Tyree and a couple buddies were buying some products for home improvement, and he made a point of saying that he has spent $1 million at Home Depot, somewhere in Southern California. I don't remember which one it was. And they were waiting in line, and the cashier was taking an excessively long time to ring up his order. Then, right when it seemed like it was going to work, something went wrong, and the cashier had to recheck out everything again because there was a glitch in the system. We've all had that happen. It's not unheard of. But of course, Tyree, being the sexy, famous star that he is, he drew a crowd around him because everyone was so happy to see him. And he thought, you know what, this might be a distraction. And he said to the cashier, hey, I'm going to have my guys here pay you with my credit card. And he removed himself to the store and was outside in the parking lot, chilling in his vehicle. Apparently, at the end of the purchasing arrangement, the cashier said, no, I need the owner of the credit card to actually present this with their ID. So whatever, something we've all dealt with, right? It's like, oh, here's your credit card. Do you have an ID? Sometimes you have to show it. And they FaceTime with Tyree, he's a big, important guy, and held it up to the cashier. And he said, yeah, I approved my credit card. The cashier's saying, no, you need to come in and do it. So the conclusion of their advanced investigation is that Home Depot is racist because they wouldn't take his credit card without him being there. Did I go off course at all, Steve?
Well, no, I think that's a fair initial summary, but it doesn't capture the horror of this. Okay. Oh. And so if you'll let me, I'll let you know a little bit more, because people may not understand the magnitude of how terrible this is. One of the worst civil rights violations of our time.
Oh yeah. Please share.
And when plaintiffs' attorneys take the time to write a complaint like these guys did, it's only fair to share a little bit of it. And so you can get the real flavor of this. So they let you know right away that Home Depot is a $160 billion a year business, and they've had runaway success. And that it's always good to signal the solvency and size of your defendant. Nevertheless, discriminatory mistreatment and consumer racial profiling persist in the stores. And Tyrese, who his attorneys say is one of the most recognizable black actors and musicians in the United States, and his associates or craftsmen, they experienced outrageous discriminatory mistreatment and racial profiling. So it goes into what you said, which is he was there to buy some things. He says it took 20 minutes to check out. And then the guy goes, oh no, we have to check it out again. Something happened in the system. Now, for me, my recent experience at Home Depot and Lowe's, this part of the story, this was back in February, so this could still be true. They don't have clerks anymore. You have to do it yourself. The employee is only there to talk to other employees, be on their phone, or to tell you why you're not doing the scanning correct. That's how it is now. And maybe that's because of what happened to Tyrese, because instead of discriminating against a particular race, these stores are now discriminating against the human race and make everyone miserable and feel tread upon while they're there. So anyway, Tyrese says, yeah, I guess you're going to have to rescan it, but look at this huge crowd of people forming around him. You know, the video will have to sort that out. That crowd didn't appear to be there later in the videos. So he does the right thing and says, just let me take my candy bars and head on out to my car. Is that he says in his complaint, he told the cashier, is it okay if I do that? Do you need anything else from me? Because I'll let these guys wrap it up. And the cashier said, no, that's good. So that's obviously an important part of his complaint, right? Because he's saying, I told the guy I'm going to go ahead and head out so I don't create a distraction and let these guys wrap it up. So he heads out to his car, but it doesn't wrap up. And then he ends up with who he calls a Karen on the telephone saying, I need you to come in and show your ID to make sure that's the right credit card. So he starts calling her Karen, but then he goes Karen because he says, do you know my neighbor in Atlanta is the CEO of Home Depot? Does he need to call y'all tomorrow? And she goes, yeah, that'd be great if you could. That would be superb if you did that. So she wasn't having any of his stuff. He wasn't having any of her stuff. So then he says, I feel the racist energy coming off of you. He says in the TikTok video that's out there now, I feel this, Karen, you're being racist against me. Then Carlos comes out, who's the manager. And apparently he's also against the the craftsmen who were with him, who were Hernandez and Mora. So Carlos, who has an accent not exactly like mine, apparently is discriminating against these people. And I can say, if Home Depot in this area discriminated against Hispanics, they just would be out of business tomorrow, because there are a lot of Hispanics in the workforce here. They're always up there when I'm there. I've never seen that. And I think a lot of their employees are Hispanic, but why he feels like that Home
Carlos,
Depot,
right?
Yeah, but Carlos, apparently was distrusting of these Hispanics. So he says that your desire to have me come back into the store and show an ID with his credit card after I told you what I was going to do proves that you were racist against me and that you were discriminating on national origin against these other two guys. I don't know why necessarily thinks that, other than the cashier appears to be one of the few white people around the cashier lead. And so she's Karen, and so it's all her fault. That's his story. Now, the $1 million comes from, he says, I've spent about $1 million at Home Depot over the last X years, so give me that money back. That's the least you can do. And he does say, and I'm sorry I missed this, because this isn't just for Tyrese. You think he's doing this for himself or because he's throwing his weight around or he's butthurt at what happened? Negative. He wants to hold them accountable. That company needs to understand there are consequences for discriminatory mistreatment. Plaintiffs, these two guys, the craftsman and Tyrese, are committed to doing their part to advance civil rights and putting into the despicable practice of discriminatory mistreatment and consumer profiling at Home Depot, and by extension, every retail store in the United States of America.
Hallelujah.
Now, I will say that one thing I found, and I'll be quiet and let you react to this, is I went on visa.com, because this whole thing about showing your ID, right? They say on their website, in general, a merchant is permitted to ask for ID, but cannot require it as a condition of Visa card acceptance. I don't know that he had a Visa. However, there are exceptions if Visa has granted the merchant permission to require ID. So that could create a little consumer confusion sometimes about when ID is really required or not, just the policies that the credit card companies have. But I guess in my opinion, the Home Depot people didn't handle it very well. And also in my opinion, he decided to show them who's boss.
And by the way, he is such a recognizable actor that I was saying his name wrong the whole time.
What is it? I probably said it wrong too.
No, you said it right. I was saying Tyree, but it's actually Tyrese. And yes. I didn't realize it. I knew, there's this dude from Fast and Furious, and I vaguely remembered that. But would I have picked him out in the public? Probably not. You're
doing nothing but increasing his intergenerational trauma.
Obviously, and somebody pointed out that it was a microaggression on my part. And I apologize deeply from my soul for the microaggression of getting the name wrong. So,
well, I just want to, for anybody who feels I'm microaggressing him, I want to issue a micro apology.
I like that.
All right. So who's seeing the discrimination here in a way that I'm not? I see why he's upset, but is it really because of his race?
Oh, I think I see a definite discrimination against a pompous movie star.
Well, I think we're entering new worlds of litigation over minor annoyances. So for lawyers now, we are going to make the world a nice, soft, pillow world.
Safe space, Steve.
For every little minor annoyances should be compensated for. Yeah, it's a new, clever way of entering the world. Maybe I should reconsider my line of work and stop doing people that are actually sentenced to death and life in prison without parole and get into minor annoyances.
Yes.
I like how he's doing this for, for everyone. His experience on this is going to be completely outside the experience of most black or white people, because most of us don't have an entourage to be like, oh, my people will handle this while I wait in the car because there's too much of a crowd here. Like,
Yeah.
Is this really, we're doing this for the good of society?
Yeah.
Like, similarly situated, like, who is this for? Yeah.
It's for every one of us out there who could be the neighbor of the CEO of Home Depot. And really, that could be anybody, right?
Yeah, so many of these I think there's a lawsuit strategy where people make ridiculous claims and talk in their thing. And really, it is a strategy for marketing, for getting publicity. So if you then we're talking about it, and now it's like, I've never heard of this guy. I don't know who he is. He's some celebrity.
Well, he's got to do something since the Fast and the Furious movies are starting to dry up. So.
You guys, you don't sound like you're acknowledging from paragraph 2 of the lawsuit the pain, humiliation, and anguish caused by this.
Can you pull up the lawsuit, Steve? I mean, I think people should see the craftsmanship.
Can I pull it up?
Yeah.
Oh,
You can share your screen and I'll pop it right on the.
By God, let me give it a try. I'm always terrified of that.
It's all right. I'm calling him a ambulance right now.
Let's see.
Yes.
It's only letting me do.
Yeah, you open it in a tab.
Good point. All right. You want to talk about something else, and I'll see if I can get it open in a tab real quick.
Sure.
I am lame. I am totally lame, but I will make this work.
That's fine. Anyway, what do we have else going on? I'm waiting for Nate to come on so we can have a boozy update, which Ian is personally involved with the boozy drama from way back. I don't know if you remember, Ian.
Yeah, that guy was such a clown. Well, is still such a clown.
Oh yes, he's consistent.
Yeah, it was just so boozy. This was kind of one of the funnier interactions I've ever had online, because he was going after Tug, saying, hey, Tug said these things, and Tug then posts a clip that doesn't seem to match the bit from Boozy. So I sort of went and said, hey, this looks a little weird. He's got this quote and then the clip doesn't match. So I don't know what's going on. And Boozy came in swinging. He's like, we've got the transcripts posted. You can check this out yourself. So I did. And I figured out how Boozy assembled that quote, which was he took something that was like one sentence and then another sentence that happened something like 6 hours later in the live stream, because Tug does epic live streams.
Yep.
And so he welded those together into one quote without even so much as an ellipsis. And so I called him out on that, and he of course went nuclear. He was accusing Rob of all sorts of like driving activities because he found somebody else with the same name who had some speeding tickets. He accused Nate of not being a lawyer, and he couldn't do crap against me because I'm guessing he tried to do his best research and couldn't find anything. So me, he just blocked because he ran out. I was like, do me next. Go ahead. Like throw, and he just couldn't find anything. So he gave up. But
okay, let me bring this up real quickly. We got somebody here going up. Well, first off, it's Boozy, not Bossy, but
Bossy.
maybe you guys can help set the record straight, because I'm not the lawyer, but you're all lawyers. In a defamation lawsuit, if it is dismissed, but without prejudice, it is set for refiling.
Yeah,
this is not unheard of, correct? That Nate has not lost the case. The case was dismissed at this point. He's refiling. Does that mean he lost? Does that mean it's over?
No. Without prejudice means you can refile.
And he's done that.
But he is doing that now. Yes,
yeah.
He's refiling now. As a matter of fact, Johnny Depp had to refile, if I recall.
Yeah, that's usually just some pleading deficiency which can be corrected. And would it be defamation for me to admit on this stream that I don't really know anything about this Boozy guy? I don't know who that is, and I don't care.
It will hurt his soul. He'll be
Okay,
in
good.
his
Well,
kitchen crying.
I don't know who he is, and I don't care, and I don't think I want to know him. So
Yeah,
I got other
he's
things to do.
And yes, he did lose some. He lost, I think, one of the claims with prejudice.
Yeah.
But the I think 3 of them all were dismissed without prejudice. And conveniently, the judge wrote in, "This is why I'm dismissing them," with some statements. So then they refile, addressing the judge's statements. And I just love everybody's going, "Oh, it's over." And of course, Boozy's dancing and dancing like crazy. So everybody, go ahead. You're right. You're right. Nate lost.
I mean, it's,
And then when he
it's
wins
a
later,
loss,
what
but
is
it's
it?
not the end of things. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay, I wanted to bring that up. And when Nate comes on, we may go into it more. But since he's not here, and then somebody else is complaining,
Yes.
why are we not talking about Nick Rekieta's lawsuit? Well, is somebody missing from the stream who might know about Nick Rekieta's lawsuit? Is Nick here? Anybody see
Yeah.
him? So that's why.
Also, if
I'm
you
not
guys-
going to go into it.
Well, also, if you guys talk about it, I really can't talk about it too much because
Oh yeah, you're a
they-
potential witness.
yeah, they list me in the complaint. So people have asked me like, "Well, why can't you talk?" And I'm like, it's pretty stupid to talk about a case where you're listed as a witness if you're trying to actually be helpful to
Well,
whoever.
it also
Yeah.
isn't it the fact that he talks about it a lot on his stream,
Yeah,
and I know that who was it? I think Kurt from Uncivil talked about it. I mean, there's a lot of coverage of that, and I don't even know anything about it. I mean, another one. I don't.
I haven't been following it, so
Yeah.
all I can say, and I'll say at this part, the idea that there's a RICO allegation involved, the answer is never, ever, 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 ever in a civil lawsuit going to be RICO, unless you're suing Rico Suave. Oh, hold on, sorry, my
Your audio is
Your audio
horrible.
is terrible, Sean.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought it got fixed. Let me come back in.
Okay. All right. So,
yeah, so
let's-
we do have a collection of very intelligent lawyers here who have their lane, their sweet spot lane. And I try not to talk about things that I don't have any direct knowledge of, or just sort of just to
No,
come up
still
with
bad.
a comment. And so
Is it better?
yeah, marginally.
Oh, sorry.
Poor Sean's got. Everybody need a fund for Sean's tech.
Well, no, I'm on my phone because my laptop is not working properly right this second. But I'm trying to get the microphone on that to work.
Okay.
What state is Nick's lawsuit in? Is it his home
Minnesota?
state or?
Minnesota.
Okay, yeah, and it's a state court.
I think so. I don't
Yes.
Oh, that's sounding better. Hold on.
Oh, can
That's
you guys
a
hear me
lot
better now? Is it better?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
must have put his
All right.
AirPods on or something. But-
Yeah, sorry about that, but-
fantastic.
Well, no, what I was trying to say though was, it was just these
ahead.
cases. RICO's never the answer unless it's never the answer. But yeah, I'll
unless
send you
you're
a
suing
link.
like the mob.
Yes,
Or Home Depot, maybe, if you're Tyrese.
to RICO.
There you went again. All right. Speaking of, let's jump back to Home Depot. Let's look at our lawsuit. Steve, is this the relevant part?
I already mentioned that I am disappointed that we don't seem to be recognizing the pain, humiliation, and anguish caused by having to come back into the store and show your ID, and that this represents the absolute height of hypocrisy for a company that claims to be an environment of mutual respect that's free of harassment and discrimination. Yeah, I do. I do wonder if they ever make anybody else ever come in there and show their ID at Home Depot, because you'd have to say they don't, right? And you're letting white people or whatever go in there and just go out to the car and let other people check out. I don't know what's happening at Home Depot. I saw somebody make a comment they won't use self checkout, and I kind of like that. But at the Home Depot here and the Lowe's across the street, there are no registers open. You would have to make a special effort. They're simply there to scold you as you check out. So there is that part with that. I am, I'm with Tyrese on this. All of this sucks, but apparently they were checking his stuff out for him, so he was already, at elite Hollywood level of service there. That there was a human being involved in his checkout. It just didn't go the way he wanted it to. But I know from social media, from looking at this, there are a lot of people who felt like that was a racist incident. I couldn't see it from all the things I saw. And while his lawyers say this is a clear and deplorable instance of discriminatory mistreatment, it wasn't that clear to me. But maybe I just didn't see all of it or experience it the same way as he did.
Why is it I can have a cashier who's an asshole to me, and they're just an asshole? But if they're an asshole to somebody else, it's racist. Somebody help me with that math.
Maybe it's just you specifically.
Okay, I am curious. It's like, don't we all get bad service from time to time? Haven't we all been pulled over by a cop from time to time? I've
posted various things on, various adventures I've had on Twitter, and it's nobody ever says, "Are you sure that wasn't because of your race?" But
actually, I got pulled over.
It's hard to say, right? Because
I got pulled over yesterday.
You don't have the experience of the other side.
Yeah, this was an interracial cop. A cop pulls me over, and he's a black guy, and I'm driving in my little white Subaru, and he pulled me over, and I'm like, I'm shocked. So I got out and I started throwing racial. You pulled me over because of my race. No, not really. Actually, he was really kind and nice, and I'm like, I didn't know what I did, but I guess I rolled the old stop sign. And he got my license, took it. It was very nice, very kind, gentle soul, and thanked him. So the thing is that this race thing, I think, is being pushed on us people by leadership, because it's another one of those wedge issues that divides people. And you don't generally, when you're talking interpersonal relations, there aren't these issues. They're being used, they're being utilized by politicians and people in power to keep us from seeing the unity and you seeing the common problems that we all have. Because if we're fighting at each other's throats, we can't look at all the problems that they are causing us. Instead, we're fighting amongst ourselves. So,
I'm gonna, while I'm probably gonna get in trouble anyway, Blue Smoke has an interesting point. The Subaru got you pulled over. Maybe the cop was going to call you a lesbian. Which brings us to our story.
Oh, this video. Oh, this.
That brings us to our next story, or I think might be a good next story here.
The Hurt Feelings Patrol in England, yes.
Yes, we have some police officer who, the individual involved said, I guess, that the cop looks like a lesbian. And when you say such terrible things about a cop, what is the proper response? You get arrested. Now,
you need a license to insult people.
Well, here's the problem that I see, and I definitely want to get into discussion on this, because this is where I see, quote, hate speech going. People are raising a defense saying that the child is autistic. I would argue, fortunately in America, at least for the moment, at least according to the letter of the law, it wouldn't matter if the person's autistic or not. They could just be rude and say something stupid, and the cop would have to deal with it and act professional and arrest them. And apparently in England, and I have a feeling that there are probably laws about, quote, hate speech, and this person felt aggrieved because of what this other person said. So that's how you respond? Now, when people want to legislate and they want to put in hate speech, watch this or look into this case and see what happens. And yes, somebody else pointed out Jacob Castro, who considers that an insult. If being a lesbian or gay or everything is absolutely heteronormative or whatever, then it's not an insult. It's just a statement. So I really want to see what you folks think about this situation, because I find it very interesting. I also find it interesting too, because we have a collision or intersection, if you will, of two, what do you call it? Because somebody who's autistic also is in the diversity. So we have a diversity collision.
It's the Aggression Olympics.
Well, and
Yes.
from the video, it didn't actually seem that it was said as an insult. It was just said as like, she looks like my lesbian grandmother. It wasn't, it was just a remark made as opposed to like even thrown as an insult. So it's just like, but I mean, this is a common problem. I don't think that this is just a UK thing, that we have police officers who feel that they're entitled to arrest people because their feelings are hurt. We get situations where people flip the cop off. They raise their middle finger at the police officer, and then the officer arrests them for something, causing a disturbance, or stunting is one that they'll use in my area. They're like, this was stunting. It's like, how is this a vehicle stunt to flip a cop off? But they'll just arrest something, on something. It's the old line of, you can beat the charge, but you can't beat the ride.
Mhm.
And, it's the answer to this is really, anytime a police officer does this, they should lose their jobs. Like
Agreed.
every one of the cops there on that hurt feelings squad should be not cops. It should be, you're done. On your way out, please pick up the McDonald's application.
There really
And-
does need. Ian's making a great point about, and I'm not.
Yes.
What the remedy is. I mean, there. It depends on the circumstance, but there needs to be consequence to law enforcement who are out of line and misbehave. And right now, and this is tough because as conservatives, we tend to be, pro law enforcement, and we want law and order, and so jurisdiction in the inner cities, you have a different situation than other, so everybody's got kind of their own locality, their own situation. But ultimately, there does need to be some consequence for police and law enforcement who really run roughshod over the rights of the citizenry. And right now we've got this judicially created protections of immunity from suit that you could sue the city, but it's not a personal thing. It's a citywide thing, and then the city pays them off. There's insurance, so there's no consequence to the line officer. And then there's all this politics. You need to get the state attorney's office that backs up their cops because they're pro law enforcement. And we see this. It's a tough question. It's a tough problem, but there does need to be consequences when you get somebody with a badge who abuses it and abuses people and abuses their rights. It's a very, when those people are doing that, that is a very dangerous thing for the republic, and we need to take it extremely seriously.
And
But
to
in
go
this
further-
case,
oh, go ahead.
in
ahead,
this
Steve.
case, were these police even quote unquote wrong under this law that they have over there?
Yeah,
I mean,
no, they're in the UK. I mean, it's to the point where if you say the wrong, like you could say things on Twitter and the police are going to show up. So it's actually not. I doubt they're outside the bounds of the law on what they did there. So I
Or you could
the
train your
biggest example
dog.
of that. What's that?
Or you could train your dog to do a salute.
Yes, well,
Yeah.
there's that, but there's also it was in the aftermath of the World Cup a couple of years ago. One of the English soccer players missed a goal during a shootout or whatever it is they're doing when they're playing soccer, and he was black, and people were saying all kinds of crap on Twitter, and people got arrested because of that. And they were just, they're calling him the N-word. They weren't actually threatening him or doing anything that would get you in trouble in America. It was merely that they were using language that was not deemed appropriate. And it happens it hasn't happened lately, but there are times where people have made comments, and like the West Essex Hobbitville police will pop in a tweet in a conversation saying, we're kind of watching everybody, just be careful. So
Here's my issue.
Yeah.
Jesus De La Royas, I don't know how to say his last name, but anyway, the body language guy was looking at it too. And if you look at the cop, her fingers were quivering at the time. And she even was side-eyeing the girl when, she's being arrested and everything else. you have to worry about the temperament of that cop. Now, in England, I don't believe they're carrying guns typically, but here in the States, now let's take this scenario a little bit further, and you have somebody that's that sensitive to a comment where they're literally quivering, ready to throw down. How much more would it take for that cop to shoot somebody?
Well, they're already using violence there. They're already
Does she even have a gun though?
No,
she was not an armed officer in the UK.
But they do have tasers. That
yes,
can cause problems.
I mean, this is where I don't know how much I can invoke Sam Hyde in this group, because I assume Runkle knows what I'm talking about. Sam Hyde has
the fifth on that.
Okay, well, Sam Hyde has great. He has a great warning tale if you run it. Well, running into female cops, that at the minute if they feel threatened or scared or angry, you better hope you have a bulletproof vest on.
Well, the line I've used in the past is that a brave person will kill you if they have to. A coward will kill you if they think they might have to in future. And the problem is that we're training cops, not just in the US or not just in the UK, but everywhere. We're training cops to be cowardly. We're training cops with like these horror stories of every possible way a police officer's ever been killed. And they run through these like simulation drills and so forth that have where the outcome of like every single interaction is, oh, you died. You didn't shoot fast enough. And so we're really training this, use aggression first strategy. And it's bad for society. It's actually kind of terrible. But that's how we've decided we're going to go.
Okay, well, that's the problem. I mean, they have psychological tests and exams. I know here in the States, at different places. When I was younger, I went to be a cop, had to go through all the tests. I know my cousin was a cop. He went through psychological exams or whatever to get his job in Missouri. But it's very, 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 it's extremely important to have the right psychological profile for a cop, because the responsibility they hold, the potential danger that they could be in, but also the risk that they pose to society is huge. And the wrong decision, it puts not only the cop in danger, it puts everybody in danger. It could be the cop, the suspect, other people, sloppiness under fire. There's a lot there. And I'm sorry, a hair trigger temper is not a good asset for a cop, in my opinion.
They're really, and the thing is there needs to be checks on police. And what are those checks? You hope that there's a state attorney's office that is independent of the police, but oftentimes they get captured by police unions. And then you also would like to have citizen review boards. And again, but then they get filled with partisans who come in with a predetermined set of conclusions. Really, the answer to a lot of these things, we're looking at these special cases. The answer to these questions is to look at things individually, and each case judge it on its individual merits according to the law and behavior. And this is what happens: is people bring their ideologies into saying, well, all cops are bad or all cops are good, or and then they can't, when there's a misbehaving police officer, they can't call it. To me, I've dealt with a lot of great cops, and I did prosecution and in defense work. And I'll say that, most of them are very honest and hardworking. It's like somebody just commented, it's a very hard job. And it's a difficult job. Not everybody can do it. I couldn't do what they do. On the other hand, good cops do not support bad cops. And this is what people, it's like, if you're a guy, there's one guy up here I got my master's degree with, and he was the valedictorian of his high school, and he always wanted to be a cop. And he's one of the best. He's a great police officer. And he doesn't want to be around with people who are abusing their badge. It's undermines the rule of law. So good cops and good lawyers and good citizens should not want bad cops in the ranks.
You mentioned that it's a really hard job, and that's definitely true for cops who are doing it properly. I think that they're like in any profession. I think there are ways to shortcut it and really do it kind of, do it in a half-assed type of way, which is and I think that's why a lot of people picture, the stereotype, the negative stereotype associated with cops is them sitting in a police cruiser all day long eating donuts, But I'd like to. I'm still sufficiently naive to believe that that's not a reflection of the majority of cops.
Well, and keep in mind too that some of that impression or whatever. Like you'll see a cop, he's sitting there. What is he doing? He might be filling out a report, because every time they do something, they have to fill out tons of paperwork and reports and things like that. And maybe they're eating a donut while they're filling out a report. I'm not going to get in the weeds on some of that, because that can be potentially unfair.
Well, one of the, we find, I remember when the advent of body cameras came in, and there was this big debate on the defense bar and the police about whether this was a good thing or bad. But I'll tell you, I found it as a public defender, I love the body cams, because it really does clarify which cops are liars and which ones are by the book and good behaving cops. And
it's helped cops. A lot of cops have been bailed because of body cam, like that Ohio. Remember that Ohio incident with that cop who is, to me, one of the most heroic cops I've ever seen.
Micaiah Bryant shooting.
Yes.
Yeah.
The speed and choices he made in a split second of time. I'm not capable of that. That guy is a cop. That guy is, if we could clone him and put him everywhere, because his judgment, he even saw somebody on the ground, determined not a threat, stopped her, literally knife was almost to the victim. All of his decisions were perfect, on point. And if he was a millisecond off, somebody would have been dead. There would have been a victim. He saved a life. If that body cam footage was not there, though, he would be prosecuted right now, because the press already were prosecuting him the second the story came out. Even with the body cam footage, there were race baiters, or whatever you will, who were going after the guy. And I totally agree with you, Steve. The body cam, it adds a perspective that we never had before.
Well, and it's an independent. Like I had a case where a guy, he didn't read the guy's rights, and he's like, oh, he wrote in his report, oh, I read him his rights, and he said X, Y, and Z, and it's not what happened at all. And the context really matters, and then what happens? I see that the biggest problem that I see, it's not planting evidence type cops. What it generally is back justifying. And that's a typical human failing. We justify our behavior. Oh, I did this because he threatened me, or he consented to my search, or he was behaving in a certain way. And then the body cam reveals that to be false. Now, the fact is sometimes you can create your memories, and cops can create memories to justify after the fact what they did. So having that objective test is really great. And I find it helpful. And then when you find the police that are lying, it really, state attorney's offices really should be creating Brady lists and providing them, and that would be a good way to ferret out these cops that are liars, because then over time their word would not be good, and they would have less credibility, and they'd become less valuable to the department. Eventually they'd be written out.
Can you define a Brady list for me?
Yeah, a Brady list is every time a police officer has been found to be deceptive, either in a report or in a courtroom or something like that, it's called it's information which they can be impeached. And so what you do is you maintain a list of police officers related to what their infraction was, what it is they lied about, and that needs to be disclosed to the defense every time that officer is involved in an incident. So the state attorney's office should maintain a Brady list.
I like that.
Oftentimes they
don't.
And you know how much these things are a joke at the end of the day? Because the courts undermine them. You know how often you'll see a court ruling say a police officer lied on the stand? Almost never. Even though it's clear. I've had court cases where it was obvious the officer was full of crap. The officer testifies to something and you're like, okay, let's roll the security camera footage. Right. So you say that he attacked you before he was in handcuffs, and that's why you had to use force. That's why he had that black eye. Here we have the video that shows you clearly handcuff the guy. He says something to you, doesn't swing, doesn't anything. He says something, which he says was an insult. And then here's you slamming him repeatedly on the floor. And the officer's like, well, I know what happened. And the judge will say something like, well, the officer clearly had some problems with his memory. It's like he didn't have problems with his memory. He had problems with his honesty. And like, yeah.
No, I agree. And the thing is, Steve, and I don't know if you've, I mean, yeah, places are supposed to have Brady lists. A lot of prosecutors' offices don't. You just know there's sketchy cops out there that are on some of these departments. And when I worked,
well, they do that because there's an incestuous relationship. Elected, same thing with the judges that are elected. They're afraid of opposition, and same thing. The prosecutors, they have the cops really have a big influence on who the prosecutors are, and so there becomes this incestuous relationship.
Because when you're running for prosecutor, if you're running and it's me versus you, and the police say, "Hey, we love Sean," people that are out there voting are going to say, "Oh, he must be good." But in the first time I worked in a public defender's office out of law school, there was this one officer that if he wrote and his name was on the bottom of a complaint, half of the prosecutors I dealt with outright would just dump it because his name was on it because they knew how big of a scumbag he was. But otherwise,
some prosecutors will support the police.
Oh yes, I've been in trial before, and we know the cop is not telling the truth. It's clearly not what happened. And I've asked, like, Your Honor, I've approached the prosecutor like, dude, he's lying. What are you going to do about this? And the prosecutor looks at me and is like, well, it appears he's just not remembering it the way it is.
Yeah, well, there's a reason
I don't think he's lying.
There's a reason for Giglio. Giglio violations are a thing, and that is when prosecutors put on to the stand knowingly false information.
Yeah,
which is shocking.
I tried to do it in that situation, and the prosecutor said, I reviewed everything with him. It appears he's not remembering it correctly. And that took care of it. He's just like, it sounds like the officer had an oopsie.
Yeah, I don't recall. The other one is when they're beating with the stick and they say, "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" That's another meme that is. I have that in a case right now, and they're torturing this guy, and he's flailing about because he's in pain by the pain they're inflicting, and they're,
Stop
saying,
moving.
Well, they're trained to say stop resisting because that affects bystanders. Bystanders will hear the stop resisting, and their memory and their observations fill in the resisting, even though it's not happening.
Because the guy's flailing around on the floor, and and they're saying stop resisting, and think, oh, his flailing is a result of he is resisting, when in fact it's a consequence, an involuntary consequence of the infliction.
If somebody's on top of you punching you in the kidneys, you're gonna move. Like, that's just the way life is.
Speaking of which, somebody in the super chat, I forgot the guy's name who was killed. Shaver, Daniel Shaver, I think is the case. How are you guys familiar with it? Because that is one of the most egregious examples.
Was that the rifle, the shot in the hotel?
Yeah.
Yes.
Simon
that guy should have been charged with murder.
Well, and not only did he get off, but he got retirement and he got pain and suffering pay. This cop who had literally written on his gun, "You're effed."
Yes. Yeah, he got full disability because it was so traumatic, shooting a crying unarmed man.
Who was trying to respond to impossibly to comply with orders.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and in Canada, we've had situations. There was a guy who was a police officer, charged with SA and drug trafficking, and they put him on paid suspension for years while he was able to drag this out in the. So meanwhile, the guy gets a second job. He's on paid suspension, and it works out to something like a little over $500,000. This guy makes for committing crimes. We paid him $500,000. It was, it's ridiculous.
Well, there's another YouTuber out here. He's a civil rights attorney. He's a guy in West Virginia who does a lot of civil rights cases involving police action. And he says it best, and it's true. It's an accountability issue with police, that you can go from place to place and be this journeyman who lies, and you get to go from place to place to place and just keep ahead of it. And I don't know if you guys saw it within the past 2-3 weeks. The police dog attacked the guy who was surrendering.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah,
you
that
see
was
that?
bad.
Oh,
Yeah,
I have
bad.
opinions on police dogs too,
Well,
but
so,
That was bad.
that's a separate. Yeah, so this guy, okay, obviously, yes, the guy was a moron, drove for like 30 miles, and the police like, I don't know why they would have stopped me. Anyway, he gets out of the car, he gets out of his semi truck, and he's walking backwards towards him. And across the median, the police have their dog out, and the group of police trying to do the rest said, keep your dog away, keep your dog away. And at some point, the guy with the dog is screaming at the guy to follow his commands. And there's even on the body cam, you can hear him yelling back, like, no, I'm listening to these guys. He cuts the dog loose, and the dog starts chasing this guy. And the funny thing is, the guy stops moving, and the dog starts running towards the other group of police who, this is the first time ever I've seen a snarling dog the police did not shoot. And the dog turns around within the last 2 or 3 feet before it attacks one of the highway patrol officers, runs back and starts mauling this guy who's literally, he by this point had dropped to his knees, starts mauling a guy who is not moving at all. And they couldn't get the dog off him for like 45 seconds. And he got investigated by his police department, and they determined they fired him not because he violated procedure, or the Constitution. They thought that was fine. They fired him because he talked to too many people about this, and they told him, don't run around and tell everybody because we're trying to, do our investigation. That's what they fired him for. Not that he killed an innocent man.
Well, I can tell you from experience, it's interesting to get attacked by one of those dogs, because I have done that with the police when they're training and have the sleeve on. And when they cut it loose on you, they say, make sure the sleeve is the first thing that dog gets to when he gets to you, because he's going to launch on you. And that's an adrenaline dump, trying to run away from one of those dogs and make sure that you got that thing back there. And when they get you, baby, they're on you. For them, it's, they love chomping down, and they put some force in. That video was awful. It's terrible.
I had a case where the police were out looking for a guy, and they found a completely different guy. It was not the guy. They say that they shouted out commands, but nobody heard those commands, and the officers couldn't agree on what they shouted. It wasn't like similar either. It was just like completely different statements. But they let the dog chew on this guy. And so there's hospital pictures where you can see the injury, and you can see the tooth marks in bone, because it just, it just got right down to bone. I'm just like, every time you see them sicking a dog on somebody, you should think of that as like the officer going after the guy with a hunting knife. That's the equivalent level of force that we're talking about.
Yeah. God, that's horrible. Horrible. All right.
Yep.
So while we're talking about horrible and possibly excessive force, I haven't studied the case. I'm sure that one of you has. Let's look at the, what is it, Craig Robertson case? Yeah, Craig Robertson.
Yes.
See, I can mess everybody's name up, folks.
Hey, I'm sorry. I've got to run. I'm sorry. Thank you for the invite. I've got to run. I've got an appointment. All right. God bless y'all. Thank you.
See you, Steve.
Right.
Yeah.
See ya.
Later, Steve.
Oh, just looking at the headline, that's his problem. If he's a teddy bear, they might have thought he was a dog, and then that's why he gets shot.
Maybe. It's. I'm not sure the case, but I know that the immediate headlines were somebody who was threatening to the president of the United States.
I did find the FBI's application for the warrant and read that, and so that has their position on it, which obviously you don't take that necessarily all at face value, but this isn't like anything else. I've seen a lot of people who are like, well, this is a Biden conspiracy, so everything was completely unjustified. And then people who are super stoked that this guy got shot because he's a Trump supporter with a gun. So of course he should be shot. I think the facts are somewhere in the middle, but if there are people, who just want to be for or against it, regardless of the facts, that's probably most of the people looking at it.
Well, can you share the facts with me? Because I literally just know that it's controversial.
Steve. That's why you're here. Share facts.
So laying out the general outline of this is an old guy. He's in his 70s. He served at least in the Vietnam era, maybe in Vietnam. This is just what I know about him. NRA dude, and came up in the trades and stuff. So he's my kind of guy, right? And he reloads and he goes for accurate shooting and stuff. He's my dude, okay? Then on the other end, you got the FBI, who's charged with protecting the president and other people. And I certainly don't like DC FBI or anything to do with the federal government. I hate the federal government. Okay, let me just admit that, the way that it behaves. This guy ends up getting killed by the federal government, so that sucks. That outcome is terrible. But
Yes.
what got him there? And I think whichever way you come down on this, whether you think they should have handled it differently or not, the fact is, anybody advising this guy that what he was doing was within his First Amendment rights, and there's never going to be a consequence for it. You're like a sovereign person. Okay, you know how sovereign citizens are idiots and they don't make any sense.
What was he doing?
All right, so here's what he did.
Yeah.
He would post things. Sometimes he would say it was in a dream. He's too old to say it was in Minecraft. So sometimes he would say it was in a dream that he was that he was on his way to New York to shoot the DA there, Alvin Bragg, who's terrible. And then he started talking about killing Biden. And sometimes it was in a dream and sometimes it wasn't. But at some point, he was ratted out. And the FBI went to his house in March to ask him about these specific threats he was making, because he also had posted up pictures with the guns. This wasn't a Call of Duty guy. This was a guy with the kind of weapons that you could do this stuff with. Now, he was old and partially crippled. I get that. He wasn't saying he was going to meet Alvin Bragg and do an MMA match with him. He said he was going to shoot him. So anyway, the FBI goes there. He doesn't want to talk to him, which that's fully within his rights. No issue with that. But then he gets back on Facebook and starts posting, "Hey, FBI, you don't know how close I was to smoking your boys out there with my 45. I almost violently eradicated them. If you're going to come back, I'll have a gun." Now, they didn't come back from any of that. Okay. They didn't come back to his house because of that. But what I'm saying is, when you write those things online, you may affect the posture of law enforcement if they do come back. But because you're not a guy who's just going to answer the door according to yourself, you're a guy who's going to shoot at them. And
well,
so
that's literally, that literally is the same behavior that's caused because of swatting. That's what they're doing, is escalating the.
And I know he's supposed to be able to do it and all that stuff, and he's old, so it's okay to say you're going to shoot people. It's just bad advice, even if you think he should be able to do it. And it's too bad nobody talks sense into this guy. But anyway, Biden's going to Utah. This guy says it's time for me to dust off the M24 rifle, and he has pictures of him with a rifle like that. And so the FBI go back out there, and then this guy gets killed. And it's a terrible outcome. I have no idea whether the actual, they're serving the warrant, whether the shoot was correct or incorrect, what happened in the house. I don't know all of that. But what I'm saying is, if you make specific threats to shoot the president of the United States with equipment that you have, the fact that you're old and partially disabled doesn't mean that you can't execute on that threat. You can expect to be tracked.
That is very high on the fuck around scale.
Yes, but I will say, I will say though, this guy was a dumb douchebag boomer. That's what he was guilty of. He was guilty of acting like a boomer on Facebook, typing in all caps, misspelling the crap out of everything. Like, that's his crime. Because even the FBI, they have to admit, like, I looked through his in his complaint. I looked through his pictures, and yes, there's a picture of him with a ghillie suit. And yeah, the pictures are dated. And by dated, he means old. Yes, from 2009, when the guy was in his late 50s, early 60s. That's how far back in the well they had to go to get the information. They thought, oh my gosh, he's trained in sniper tactics. It's like the most typical gun store funny boomer type you've ever seen or heard of. I mean, like I said, this guy's guilty of being a tool. But it also doesn't, I don't ever recommend people start talking about your masturbatory fantasies of, putting a bullet through Merrick Garland's head or Alvin Bragg's head, or commenting, things like he said, like, hey, Letitia James, you can't, you can't outrun this, or you can't dig a hole deep enough to hide from whatever. Like, no, you shouldn't be doing that. It is as you said, Runkle, it's very high on the fuck around scale. Does that mean it was illegal? I don't think so, based on what they had, because they talk about like 3 separate acts, but then they show the rest of everything he said. And obviously, they didn't bring those up because they weren't. But yes, they go address this guy. Nothing happens. And yes, if they're so worried about him, it takes them months to come back. And then yes, it was after this whole Biden thing, which at this point, the other issue is the FBI does not deserve the benefit of the doubt. They've completely punted on getting that issue because of their actions throughout their entire organization. So at this point, I assume they're just lying and making things up because that's what they've done so far. So I at this point, I assume the guy's innocent and didn't do anything wrong, was drinking orange juice, and they shot him in the face because at this point, I don't trust the FBI to be accurate in what they're doing. So
Also accurate.
Wow.
What's that, Runkle?
I said also a fair assessment.
Yes, at
Yeah,
this point, I can't trust them as far as I can throw them.
Well, I'm not going to give anybody legal advice, but I am going to suggest that if you think that if the president is coming to your town, that it's time to dust off the sniper rifle, and he posted a picture of that rifle in December of 2022. The ghillie suit was older, which the FBI did say in the warrant, but he was posting that rifle at the time he was saying these things about killing people. And I mean, I pulled a complaint up in another window. All I'm saying is, because I believe in venting off and things like that, when you make specific threats, and he did do that, you may start getting tracked, you may get visited. And then when you say after they visit you, you're lucky I didn't kill you when you were here the first time, I'll have a gun ready the next time you come back, you may change the dynamic of how the next visit goes. But he should get his own lawyer. Anybody should. But I am telling you, because I'm around a lot of conservative people and I am one. If we start talking like that, we all have an obligation to just settle it all down, because you're inviting trouble by doing what he was doing, old or young.
Yes, I agree.
I wouldn't recommend it.
I would recommend telling the police they better come heavy. That's not a good idea.
Now, having said that, I don't have any idea whether they should have shot him or not. I don't know what happened at his house.
Yeah.
Joe?
No, I was saying threats are irrational.
Why wasn't it Secret Service?
There's no point to it. There's no benefit.
That's the other question. Why wasn't it Secret Service too? I mean, if the threat was perceived against the president, why was it the FBI talking to him? Shouldn't the Secret Service have been out there clearing this individual for a specific threat?
Typically, they do that. They generally handle it, but they may have. I think I'm willing to bet that the Secret Service looked at this and said, "This is some dumb schlub boomer. Let the FBI field office out there take care of it. We've got bigger threats to worry about." I guarantee you that's what's going to come out of this at the end of the day. So even the Secret Service is like, yeah, just can you run this lead down for us? This is probably nothing.
I don't know. It's troubling. I do agree with Steve, though, on that. I can actually agree with both of you at the same time. Like, please, nobody makes stupid ass statements like that.
Yes.
It's never going to come out well.
And there's a difference between things you've got a right to do and things that are a good idea or, safe to do. And that's kind of, we're at this intersection of, he might have been okay to say these things. And I don't know. I mean, that's debatable. But even so, it's dumb and unsafe to do so.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it as well.
It's like, don't make stupid ass statements in front of the TSA. That doesn't go well for you at the airport. I promise you.
Yeah. Well, and you get situations like this in self-defense cases where you've got two people, both of whom are behaving like idiots, but within the law. And then suddenly you get to a point where both of them reasonably fear for their safety, and either of them can take the swing. And at this point, you're in a situation of somebody might die, and whoever, and nobody's going to jail over it. It's like, this is a bad place to be living right at that point.
I want to address Colt here real quickly. So just shut our mouths. We're not saying that. There are other ways that you can state your disagreement, your opinion, things like that. Let's take politics out of it and say that he was making those statements about your mother. Would you react well to somebody saying that about your mother? You might be a little upset. So he could probably do it in a different way, or we can do it in a different way. We can be very clear with our displeasure. Joe here is an expert at displaying his displeasure with many political things. For example, a current sitting president. I don't think Joe is a giant fan, but I don't think that the FBI is ever going to be visiting Joe's house, or even Steve's house, or anybody else.
Hopefully not.
Notice Eric did not say my house.
Oops.
I wish I had
Joe's
the
not
same
in my
confidence.
house. Joe's not in my house.
I wish I had the confidence that you have, Eric. I hope you're right. But
Hey,
I'll tell you this much: you can say what it is. You know what? There are. It is a crime, I believe, to make threats against the president. I don't think that's protected speech to make a clear threat against the president. That's
no,
and that's not something new. I mean, that's something that's been there probably my entire lifetime. Is that it's been illegal to make a threat against the president. So does that mean that he should die for it? No. But as everyone in this panel has been pointing out, once you cross a certain line, you're basically putting your life in the competence and integrity of people who don't like you. I mean, and even if that competence breaks down where they make a mistake or their integrity breaks down or doesn't exist, or so they're willing to breach the certain laws, you're basically saying, I'm going to bet my life that that's not going to happen. Why would you put yourself in that position when you can express yourself just as passionately without saying that you're about to commit harm? I think that so that when we're talking about dialing back the rhetoric, it's not suppressing your speech. It's the nature. You can have the same tone, but it's the nature of how you're expressing yourself, whether you express an intent to do harm to others and a capacity to do harm to others, rather than just expressing your gross disgust at the powers that be, which that you have complete free First Amendment rights on.
By the way, this is well played, Jim Satala. Well played. The guy's big mistake was starting his post with, I had a dream. Didn't he know what the FBI did to the last guy who started his speech talking about a dream he had?
Mm-hmm. But even if you just take the politics out of it, let's say he was talking about his neighbor, and his neighbor, they're having a dispute over, is the fence 2 inches to one side? The kind of stupid thing that neighbors get into fights over all the time. And let's say he's posting online, I'm going to shoot this guy. I've got a handgun. I'm going to put a hole in his head the next time I see him. They go out and they just happen to be in their respective driveways looking across at each other. And the guy sort of makes a face and reaches for his car keys. And the other guy pulls out a gun and shoots him. And at trial, he'd be saying, listen, I was seeing this guy on Facebook saying, I'm going to shoot this guy. I'm going to kill him. I hate him. And then he looks at me and he reaches for his pocket. I thought he was going for a gun. I drilled him. This kind of thing has the risk that you're going to end up with somebody taking you seriously.
Right. The chat's pointing out a lot of people are upset, and I think it's fair that there was a complete double standard, that there were a lot of threats against Trump that they feel were completely ignored. I would say not all of them. Kathy Griffin did get canceled for that image of Trump as an example, but I'm sure there probably were. And I'm not saying that that's right. And I get worried about whataboutism, because if it's wrong, it's wrong. If it's a threat, it's a threat.
Did she get canceled over that, or just because she's awful?
No, it was because of she was holding the head, chopped off, and all of that. She did.
And Eric,
I think she'd overstayed her welcome as a comedian long before that, though.
Could be.
I mean, the media basically cheered the attack on the White House because Trump was in it. They would have loved to see the White House overrun and blame it on him. That's absolutely true in terms of the media and parts of the government. So at double standard, hell yeah. Having said that, people were arrested for threatening Trump. It's not everybody is corrupt everywhere, but there's definitely a double standard. But it has, as Joe said, been longstanding law that if you make what is considered a true threat, because if it's just blowing off steam or aspirational or part of a speech and stuff like that, then it's protected speech. But there is a law against this, and if you reach that threshold or get to close enough to where they think you do, you're inviting a response. And then again, I'm looking at this thing, and he says, they tried to interfere with free speech in my driveway. My 45 ACP was ready to smoke them. And this isn't the kind of thing you should be saying when you're he could have said, look, I just want to say what I want to say, guys. What the hell is the problem with that? Well, I threatened to kill the agents who came to ask about it. So, it didn't work out. And it sucks, because I think he probably was a great guy in his community and with his family. In fact, I am sure of that. But there's a lot of bad advice all over social media about what you can do, from sovereign idiots to everything else. And And this guy, if he'd had a little bit better direction, he could have said all kinds of terrible things about the federal government, because it does suck. I mean, there are a lot of things I think about it too. I mean, I don't respect it. I hate DC. I don't trust them at all. But there's some lines that you have to look at that apply regardless of whoever is sitting in the White House. You know what's going to happen if you break that rule.
I want to address the whole whataboutism that seems to be so commonplace today, because we see such stark contrast between this administration and the Trump administration, and they'll try to make comparisons. If you bring up Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's corruption, so everyone on the left will start talking about Trump's corruption, and it's a way of deflecting from the conversation at hand, whether it's being done by the left or being done by the right. Whenever you hear people arguing, and they start engaging in, you start talking about the evilness of this or this, some type of situation. And the other side starts bringing up a completely different situation of what they perceive to be a similar type of evil, or contrasting it and talking about that whole, but what about this situation? In order to recognize whether that's a deflection from like the topic at hand, or whether it's actually a fair thing, you have to ask yourself, okay, if we examine your whole what about, how does that relate to here? How does that relate to the situation we're talking about in the here and now with respect to a threat against President Biden? Because just because perhaps the FBI let's assume that you're correct, the FBI sucked at prosecuting or chasing down potential threats to the president. Does that mean that because they sucked during the Trump administration at doing that improperly, whether it was lack of integrity or lack of competence, they sucked at it? Do you think that creates now a new normal, that anyone can now just go and say something like that and threaten with the capacity to present themselves as a true threat to President Biden, because perhaps in your mind, and you might be correct, you might be completely correct, but let's say because people got away with that during the Trump administration, do you think that now becomes a new normal that anyone can do it? And obviously the answer to that is no. And that's why you have to realize that, yeah, it might suck that there was, it might be a reflection as to how poor the FBI or the internal agents were worried about Trump. And it might show that there's some level of corruption within the FBI, in that they have different yardsticks. At the same time, that doesn't make what this guy did any more kosher, any more acceptable, just because people got away with it during the Trump era. And I think that whenever we're hearing this what about type of argument, you really need to sort of think rationally, okay, how does that impact the situation at hand, rather than just saying, well, if the other side did it, we can do it too. Because that's and we hear this, I hear from people on the right do it, I hear people on the left do it, and I'm just trying to help steer the dialogue back towards logic and what seems appropriate and fair. And I figure I'm sitting with a panel of attorneys here who can digest the distinction there as far as comprehending the argument and then playing out like, okay, how does that argument you gave now manifest into properly assessing the situation that we're trying to assess here and now?
Totally well put, Joe. Thank you. And that's why I was trying to say in the sense of like, whataboutism, there is an example of it where I can sort of see it when you're saying selective prosecution, like two people did the same thing, identical, one's being prosecuted or not. And that's one of the arguments that Trump is putting forth, right? That the documents case, he's saying, whoa, what about Joe? What about this? What about that? And I can't understand cases of it if it's on point. Is that where you're going, Joe? Is it actually on point or not?
Yeah,
because
precisely. Look, you can break down and make all the arguments in the world as to why the FBI was completely corrupt and gross, and it was gross negligence, if not malicious, and that's all appropriate and should be done. I'm simply saying, I'm simply saying that bringing up stuff that happened with the FBI under Trump, that I don't think anyone here thinks that because that guy was with Trump, now that means that any schmuck out there in the world should have a right to basically walk around with a rifle out and circling around the White House saying, I'm going to kill the president because that's free speech. And it's just like, it doesn't make sense. Even if someone would have gotten away with that during the Trump era, no one would say that, well, since Kathy Griffin did that, 7 years ago to Trump, so now someone should be able assuming she had taken those steps, which she obviously did something disturbing, but not quite a threat in that capacity. But the point is, just because someone gets away with it in the past, that doesn't mean that we are now living in a new world where that's something that, that's something that every American has the right to do. It's just that doesn't square with logic. You can't get that round peg in that square hole.
Totally agree. And somebody's saying there's shit talk. Well, shit talk can be very convincing.
I guarantee you that if you shit talk about, I'm going to show up at my local police station with a shotgun, they're going to come and shit talk you right back. You post that online. Sometimes shit talk has consequences when you talk about shit talk, involving force. So, be
and
careful.
you also should, and I like reframing it like that, Ian, I totally agree. It's like, always take the case and then flip it the other way. Always look at it like, if it's against somebody that you like, would you be okay with it? If it's against somebody you hate, and you're like, oh, well, it's because of da-da-da, and that's not fair. Well, okay, let's flip it. Let's say it's against somebody you do like. Now, is it okay? I mean, there are many times, and it can be frustrating, but sometimes you have to just say, hey,
I think it's fair. I think it's fair to take into consideration this guy had, he did have physical limitations and stuff like that. And I understand people view that as part of the outrage. Like, could he reasonably be expected to have executed on these threats? The problem is you're dancing a fine line right there, baby. When you are, because I've also seen comments he didn't make any threats, and that's nonsense. I mean, just read the documents. He did. Now, whether he could realistically carry those through or not is a different ball game. And did they have to go to his house and do it the way they did it and all that? I hear all of that, but he was doing things that are against the law, whether you like the law or not. And it led to this. Whether it was appropriate, what happened at his house or not, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to ever know. I mean, I don't trust the government either, but it is poor form to support people posting pictures of weapons that say, I'm going to shoot the president. Now he's coming to my town. I'm going to get my sniper rifle out. Hey, FBI, you were in my yard. You don't know how close you came to me smoking you with my 45. If you have a friend doing that and you like them, you may want to suggest they just dial that back a little bit. That's not talking in your home. It's posting it on Facebook. In fact, the FBI said they first found out about this guy because a social media company alerted them to things he was saying. That's in their affidavit.
And also, if you've got an organization like a club or a group or a Discord server or whatever, and somebody comes in and starts talking about like that, they're either an idiot or a cop, or the overlap of the two. But you should probably remove that person because, typically the guy who shows up is like, hey, let's do a violence is,
Okay, now I have two people here who are very, very deeply experienced with guns. Tell me he's not able to walk very far, things like that. Does that mean he cannot take a rifle and shoot somebody?
I mean, it's
Did
all
anybody say he was incapable of picking it up and pulling the trigger?
It's situational whether he could have put himself into a position to actually harm the president or not. I don't even know what Biden was doing.
No, I'm talking about the FBI. The FBI that he said, you're lucky I was going to shoot you. I had my weapon on hand. Could he have harmed the FBI? I'm just asking you that question as a gun expert.
Doesn't take a whole lot.
Whether he would have
on the target.
And whether he was as good at it as he wanted to imagine he still ever thought that he was, it doesn't take a lot of effort to hoist the gun and fire a gun at somebody. Now, that doesn't mean that, you're going to be tactically running around the yard and things like that. And, I definitely would not want to entice people to come to my house to take me down tactically in a large group of law enforcement, because I know how that would end for me. I mean, just don't, if you actually know anything about this stuff, you wouldn't be talking about it on social media like that. So that's one, but of course you could shoot somebody. Here's your gun karate's right here.
I mean, my grandmother almost
John Wick.
My grandmother almost got herself killed because she found this handgun that belonged to a relative, and she decided she was going to go turn it into the cops. And she did not think this one through, because what she did is she walked into a police station, said, I have a gun, and pulled it out. And she got tackled. She was very unhappy that she got tackled. And we told her later.
We talked about that last week.
That's like
that
an
you
episode.
never announce I have a gun. Who was that? Somebody, was it you, Steve?
That's like an episode of that 70s show where Kelso calls up the White House to say, because they think that someone else is making a threat against the president. So we want to let you know that there's a threat against the president. Oh yeah, I'm completely armed. Where am I at? And he starts giving his address, and everyone starts his friends all start tackling him.
Well, I think there was a guy arrested out of New York for threatening to kill Trump, and he didn't have a gun, but he was calling the Secret Service and saying, I'm going to get one. I can get one real easy. And he did end up getting arrested, but yeah, it's just not a good idea. Now I see people debating whether this was really a true threat under the Constitution. Good arguments to have, but I'm saying you're putting yourself in a position to have that argument. Meanwhile, law enforcement is getting ready to execute a warrant on you because they see it as falling inside this law. It's just not a good idea, in my opinion. But everybody do what you want, unless you're my neighbor. And then please do not post this stuff because I don't want to get hit by a ricochet.
Yeah.
On that note, this is not that note. Next subject. I thought this was a very interesting headline. Speaking of our favorite three-letter agency, have you seen this? The FBI special investigator who was investigating the Trump-Russia collusion to plead guilty to conspiring with a Russian oligarch. Isn't that fun, folks? This is what you call confession through projection, over and over and over.
Even funnier, Oleg Deripaska, the oligarch, was later, throughout this whole saga, was made a confidential source by the FBI so they could protect him, and they didn't have to disclose him. That way they could pay him, and he's now one of their agents or source. He got tried and got acquitted in D.C., so this guy probably would have got acquitted as well had he just gone all the way through with it.
Well, hey, the FBI, they have a great track record with informants. You know who one of their biggest informants was for a long time? Yep. You knew where I was going.
Yep.
And the FBI agent who was working with him, I believe, went to prison himself. Mm-hmm. And it's just...
Yes.
It's horrible.
And the FBI muckety-muck that came out to clear up all the issues in Boston in the aftermath of all that was a guy named Robert Mueller III.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Robert Mueller has other interesting ties. My friend Robert Barnes has a hush-hush on Robert Mueller and his track record and certain people that he's been around at really weird times, and very interesting character. For example, I think he handled the Isaac Asimov's son's case with CP, and somehow the guy got completely scot-free, and then he got moved to another, and his movements and positions have been a very odd pattern. There's a lot to it. I can't remember all that he said, but anybody else have any thoughts about our very special agent, Charles McGonigal, who will be pleading guilty for actually colluding with Russians?
He's just one of a crowd who did it.
The house.
Yeah, exactly.
But is anybody else getting tired of this? I mean, it's like what you hear over and over. How long was the Rushgate story in the news?
Oh, forever.
Yeah.
It was all obviously nonsense.
It was 2.5 years.
It's just nonsense.
Joe, you weren't saying anything for a while. I'm like, Joe's looking back and forth to see what his Russian handlers are telling him to do.
I think so.
Yes,
okay.
Joseph, you must be quiet.
So let's get back to, I guess, we'll call it normal people. I don't know, normal people or just typical cases. Alexia Treviso, Alexia Treviso. Yeah, she's in the news. I think, Steve, you've been covering that. What's up with Alexia?
She's the young woman who was pregnant, went to the hospital finally at full term and was having the baby, lied to the staff there about it. And while they were figuring out what was really going on, she went down to the bathroom, had the baby, stuffed the baby in a trash can, wrapped up into a trash bag, covered it with other trash, cleaned up the scene, returned to her room. And the medical expert says the baby suffocated. And, her side obviously disputes that and says that the baby was stillborn. Well, she's facing criminal charges, but they did get a personal representative appointed to file a plaintiff's action against the hospital and doctor, saying that they killed the baby by giving her pain drugs during her treatment and not handling it right and all that. And this is a case, I think, of where the 99% of the lawyers make the rest of them look bad joke is true, because to me, that's totally disgusting. It's disgusting to file a lawsuit claiming your lack of companionship with this child, blaming it on the emergency room doctor and the hospital staff who had to endure what this young lady did, when she could have turned that baby over to him. It was a safe place where a child can be abandoned there. She could have screamed for help. She could have done anything other than she did. She's the reason that baby is dead. If it wasn't, if the child was not born, stillborn, and yet they want money off this baby. So the baby was going to be trash, headed to a dumpster. As far as her and her family were concerned, they didn't even ask the gender of the baby, anything else about it. They just wanted to make sure she wasn't going to get in trouble. And now that baby, though, could be a paycheck, and suddenly the life has all this value. And this complaint that if you read it, I couldn't read it online because it just makes me too mad to read the blame shifting.
Her loss of companionship, you can tell she's obviously been suffering greatly from this scenario, as she made sure to attend prom and have a really nice time. What is this, 3 months after that fact?
Here we have a woman of color, and Steve is questioning her truth. You're questioning her truth. It's outrageous. It's outrageous.
Yes, you white man.
And this is a fair point, because I'm just trying to get a job at Home Depot. To call back to our first segment.
Yes,
Tyrese would be ashamed of me right now for questioning her truth.
As he should be. So while we're talking about other creepy people, Runkle, I think you're recovering
segue.
Oh, wow.
I think you're recovering a Duggar
you can
update.
Take that sitting down, Runkle.
Yes, I did look at that one. He had an appeal, and it didn't go well for him because his appeal grounds were kind of crap. So his first appeal ground was, I made statements to the police while I was in custody. And the appeals court is like, you say you were in custody, and yet the police officers told you were free to leave, told you could go at any time, scratched out on the caution warning. In fact, they say that Duggar himself scratched out on the caution warning, I am in custody, scratch that part out, which clearly indicates he understood that he was not in custody. Yes. He hung out with them for a while, chatting. He was asking questions. Now, his questions also incriminated him, because
they did.
The first thing that the officer's like, hey, we're here with a warrant. And he's like, has somebody been downloading CP? It's like, yeah, how did you know that? If it's not you, then how did you know this? So, it was, so they rejected that. Oh, and they also point out at the end of the discussion, Duggar says, oh, I'm done talking, gets out of the car and leaves. They're like, how are you in custody if you were able to get out of the car and leave and you weren't even arrested at the time? So, no, you were not in custody. That one is crap. The next argument he says that he didn't get a fair trial because he wanted to be able to point to this other guy who worked there and say, this guy had a record for sex offenses. Well, that guy's record, from what I understand, was for essentially a sort of Romeo and Juliet situation of close-ish in age, but still an offense. And so, but the court is like, if you want to make this argument, you need something more than this guy was here and he's got a criminal record. You can't just speculate that, oh yeah, it's totally this guy and point to him because he's suspicious. You actually need some evidence, and you didn't bring any. So no, they were right in kicking that out. So that gets launched. The real basis for his appeal is, I don't want to do 12 years in jail. And I get it. I wouldn't want to do 12 years in jail either, but he did the things, so he gets to spend the time. I don't have any sympathy for the guy in this or any circumstance, really. In fact, he's lucky that he didn't get charged for some of his other activities that resulted in the end of the show. So yeah, it's an interesting appeal decision, but they don't have a whole lot of time for his arguments.
I don't feel that bad for him. I mean, I'm kind of thinking I'm glad that his children are away from him, because I think there were questions all around.
Yeah.
So very, very dark stuff, which is a perfect time to wrap things up, I think. Ian, what do you have coming up?
I'm going to be following up on the case of Jessica Yaniv. I don't know if you know who this person is.
Ugh.
Jonathan Yaniv.
Yeah. Yes.
Here in America, we
The
call
one-
him Jonathan.
The
I
one
think
who
that-
likes to go to Asian spas. Typically.
Well, I think the legal name now is Simpson. I don't know.
Jessica
changing their
Simpson. Oh,
name.
that's too funny.
I suspect that was done in large part to make it difficult to do Google searches.
I believe it.
But they filed a lawsuit against. So they wanted to sue a kebab shop, and the reason why is the claim is that they showed up and were having a diabetic incident and weren't allowed in based on their service dog. And that has been tossed because it's complete crap. But just going through, I kind of want to do a thing just looking at the whole history of this person and all of their fun court battles, because there's been a lot, and they're a complete nightmare. So
there's a term that we had in the military for individuals like that. We called them oxygen thieves.
I'm just waiting for the inevitable vexatious litigant proceeding, because there's a process for like saying this person abuses the court system and is not allowed to do that anymore. So I'm waiting for that to happen. It hasn't happened yet, but still hoping.
I'm hoping with you. Steve, what do you have coming up?
Well, by unpopular demand, tomorrow I'm going to do a stream on Sarah Boone and go through her case more back through the docket, because there's some things I've found in it that are actually interesting. Yeah, she's a wild one, but she posted another letter yesterday that we went through, and it called back to some things early on in her case, and she's an interesting individual who, to her, has never done anything wrong. Everything wrong has been against her, but she also sometimes makes some points that maybe should be listened to in terms of her defense. So I'm going to try and pull some facts out of the docket and show that to people tomorrow morning.
Cool.
And Sean, potentially criminal.
Yeah, I actually just went through Leah Remini's complaint against the Church of Scientology. She just filed a big lawsuit against them for multiple torts. If you guys weren't aware, for people who don't know, she was very big in the Church of Scientology up until 2013. She left. She did a TV show on A&E, and even while she's filming the show about all the people who left and why Scientology is so bad, they were harassing her and causing problems. And even since the show's been over, they've been harassing and causing problems. So it's very interesting to see. And the neat part for her is that she has court case after court case after court case she can rely on to draw from, where courts have determined that the Church of Scientology engages in all these criminal activities. They do things that are highly questionable and unethical and borderline illegal, and when they harass and go after people. So it'll be very interesting to see how things go from here for her.
She's trying to get the judge thrown off the case. Did you see that?
Yes, I did see that as well.
What's up with that?
I mean, the thing is here, and this is something the Church of Scientology has been good at, they have infiltrated so many places, organizations, and groups that even while this judge isn't a Scientologist, that they've done enough, that they've made inroads, and that they have a lot of sway over people. They engage in basically the same kind of activities that the Twitter bully mobs do, but they're actually able to succeed at their objectives pretty much like all of the time. But they have so many groups and people who either voluntarily do their bidding, or they've paid off, or unknowingly do their bidding. And I don't know if she's going to get this judge off the case at this point.
Are they going to be able to depose Shelley Miscavige?
Yeah, well, that's
Good luck.
yes. If I was them, I'd put a subpoena out for her. But yes, it will be very interesting just because of the prior, just because even in the complaint is very detailed. It's got like 40 or 50 footnotes in it, and just citing all the cases where they've been documented in California alone, like they've done X, Y, and Z. And this one, it's interesting with the Church Scientology. Back in the 70s, there was a reporter who started really reporting on them. They they stole her typewriter ribbon, and they stole her typewriter, and they manufactured like her making threats to the Church of Scientology, and she got indicted for it. And then they tried to make it look like she was threatening federal officials, and she got in even more trouble. And she was able to clear her name, and the FBI raided them and found all the stuff they were doing while they were trying to get this woman sent to prison. So
they're known for it. Sean, I've had John Atack on multiple times. He wrote the book "Sell Me a Piece of the Blue Sky" about Ron Harvard.
I've read that book.
Okay, yeah, he's one of the first prominent Scientology people, but that book, he made quite a bit of money on it because it was the most stolen book in the United States and England from libraries. Literally, their people would go in and steal the book to keep it out of the library. I mean, they're notorious for this. They wound up beating the IRS because, as Blue Smoke put in, they overpowered them by infiltrating the IRS and hectored them and harassed them and sued them and screwed with them in every which way possible until finally the IRS said, if we say you're a religion, will you stop? And they won. The only people who beat them was Time Magazine. Did ultimately win. I think the case took like 10 or 15 years, and it was literally like a Pyrrhic victory. Like they lost so much money pursuing the church, because the church will sue on a dime. They will hector, harass, do everything. And that's part of the reason people are afraid of covering them, is because they'll sue. Like, they'll probably try to sue me. I don't need it right now. So I'm going to escape this situation by putting it on our favorite philosopher, Joe Neerman, who always shares what's going on with him, what people can do, and of course, his thoughts on the day.
So I'm actually engaging in a couple different directions. I'm looking into a study about people with stump arms and their struggles in dealing with life. And I'm also looking into this whole recent analysis of different paint viscosity and how long it takes to dry. So if you check out my channel, you'll be able to learn a lot more, because we're going to be studying how long it takes for that paint to actually become completely dry versus being somewhat damp and dangerous for people to touch. And this is obviously public service. And you can check that out only on goodlogic.locals.com. That's goodlogic.locals.com. Make sure you check that out.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And on that note, God, we will see you with some people, some way, talking about the law, possibly next Friday.